Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 187 for August 12th, 2020. The EdTech Situation Room is a weekly podcast where we focus on the news headlines from across the techosphere and shoot them through an educational lens. Joining me, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. Hola, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you tonight?
Bienvenidos, Jason. I am well and looking forward to the return of students on Friday. So we are, it's been a less hectic time back because we normally just have a 1 week and it's just jam packed with meetings, and we've had more like a week and a half. And anyway, it's felt better. So I am the director. No, I am not a director. I am a Spanish teacher and a computer teacher. So that's right. I'm a 5th and 6th grade media and digital literacy teacher and a 5th grade introductory Spanish teacher. But my proverbial, title that is technology integration innovation specialist at the Cassidy School in Oklahoma City. So Jason, I assume you are still performing some roles related to email for the Montana Digital Academy. Is that correct?
That is indeed correct, where I didn't even talk about who I was. I'm Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the University of Montana campus. And although there is lots of distance learning that will be going on in coming weeks and months in Montana, my program, which has a more limited role, will certainly see an increase in enrollment, but a lot of questions, and also doing our best to help out schools in Montana to talk about the ins and outs of distance learning. But yes, lots of email during this time of year, lots of talking to parents, and we do not have administrative support, so we kind of answer our own telephones. But frankly, I kind of like that this time of year. It gives me an opportunity to talk to parents and principals and teachers and counselors across the many, many miles of Big Sky country to talk about where maybe we fit in for a lot of unique student cases. But this isn't just about us. We've got another agenda tonight related to the links. You can go to our website, edtechsr.com/links, check out everything we're talking about tonight, whether we get to the article or not. And as last week and the week before, and I believe the week before that, we have a stunning number of stories that we can talk about, including a number of things from last week. But this week in our tracker, some COVID-19 news, some social media news, a little bit about privacy, something that we like to call on the podcast the tech correction, a little bit about how technology is evolving as we spot the maybe benefits and detractors of the concept. Microsoft news, Apple and Google news, some information warfare news, a category called miscellaneous. And then, of course, we'll end our episode tonight with Geek of the Week. Dr. Fryer, you're up on the big board. Where should we start tonight?
Let's start with a COVID article. This is from yesterday, August 11th. Ars Technica. Russia skips COVID-19 vaccine trial, says millions to be vaccinated this month. And so you may wonder, the technology angle here. I think we probably reported a few weeks ago on the show there was an alleged hack of some vaccine, data from U.S. companies. And there's conjecture on whether that was Russia, whether that was China. I am not a vaccine expert, but, reading this article and other things, there are a series of phases that vaccines go through in terms of a limited phase 1 trial, and then they scale up to phase 2 and phase 3. We have talked about and mentioned the roles in which disinformation is playing in society, not only with elections, but with other kinds of things. Different authors have talked about how, the very vocal anti-vaccination lobby or group that is out there in the world, not just in the United States, but elsewhere, is probably going to play a significant role as, vaccines are developed, et cetera. And then, this unfortunate competition that is happening between nations, in terms of who can bring the virus, a vaccine, to the market first. So this article starts off by saying Russian President Vladimir Putin announced Tuesday Russia is the first country in the world to grant regulatory approval for a COVID-19 vaccine dubbed Sputnik 5. And he claimed one of his own daughters had already received a dose of the vaccine. Pretty crazy. So Jason, are you ready to sign up for Sputnik 5?
I was wondering if you were going to ask me that. No, I will not be taking a vaccine that was developed in such little time. And obviously, this caught a lot of attention in the last 24 hours. I know there's a lot of coverage on NPR about this morning. And, it's obviously problematic from the standpoint of the risk to, recipients of this vaccine in Russia. But I guess the part of this that I personally am pretty disgusted by is that, obviously nobody wants a delay in getting a vaccine or even medical interventions on behalf of COVID-19 victims. But we have a scientific process for a reason. And it's just, yes, the virus is terrible, but if we vaccinate millions with vaccines that are either ineffective or what I'm much more fearful of, that are dangerous to human beings, it's going to create an awfully terrible situation for an awful lot of people. And I know the part I don't like about that, particularly with President Putin in Russia, or whatever he's calling himself now, Supreme Leader Putin in Russia, is the fact that it's turning it into an international competition. It's one thing to have an international competition to get to the moon or get to outer space, where there is it millions of people's lives on the line. It is not appropriate for a vaccine development process. And for those that have been keeping track of vaccine development over the last couple of weeks and months, it's probably not going to be one vaccine that does this. It's going to be probably a vaccine which has a variety of strategies, vaccine strategies, that's probably going to be effective here. And remember, for this to be completely effective, we have to have a large percentage of members of the human race take it. But then secondarily, we also have to be able to do that to 7 billion people around the world. And I didn't like hearing about that this morning. Like, even if it is a legit vaccine, right? Even if there is no risk to humans and it's effective, I think it sets up dangerous precedents. So, I, for one, cannot wait for a vaccine. My life is substantially changed under COVID-19, but I certainly don't want to take shortcuts to get to that point.
Where to next, sir?
Okay, a couple other quick COVID notes here. Wes and I were talking about this before the show, but Android Central published an editorial on August 9th that talks about navigating the Chromebook crunch of 2020. And I have a little bit of personal experience with this with my day job, but chances are, if you work in IT for a school, or you are a teacher in the school or an administrator in a school, and you've tried to ramp up your technology assets as part of a learn at home or a distance learning play, or even to provide more technology access in your school in the last couple of months, you've probably noticed that very few things are shipping as quickly as they were pre-pandemic. And this article talks specifically about Chromebooks, and there's a couple of points here I want to talk about in a moment, but there's a lot of reasons for this, not the least of which the global supply chain was substantially disrupted. Remember that the origin of this, the coronavirus, was in China, which provides a serious percentage of the world's electronics and the capability for manufacturing. And for me personally, as part of my work at the Digital Academy, we're bringing on a couple of part-time employees for one of our projects this month. And we are a Chromebook shop in that we send out Chromebooks to our remote staff so we can easily manage those via the cloud. And sure enough, when I went to go buy Chromebooks, and these weren't even the standard school Chromebooks, these were, I tend to believe in kind of the medium spec Chromebooks as a strategy. And I plan on kind of showing off the ones we ended up picking up here in a moment when they finally arrived. But I just needed 3 of them, and I contacted Best Buy, and we have a business account with Best Buy. I'm not a consumer that's calling up looking to corner the market on Chromebooks, and I had to navigate a pretty serious set of phone calls to get 3 ordered. And originally they told me that the aim date for shipping was the end of August. I was told it could go into to late September, and it ended up a couple of days later. They shipped 2 of them, and then the final one showed up today. And there's a really decent chance, I think, that if you're not ordering until right now, or if you think you're going to be able to order now and get them like you have in the past, that's not true. That's also true if you are a parent or you are working at home and you need a new equipment. If you think you might need something in September, October, and November, don't wait around. Order that right now. Get into the priority list for various vendors. This Android Central article does make a couple of good suggestions. It talks about that even if you are IT, looking at local sources, including retail, might be an opportunity to pick up computer equipment that otherwise isn't making it into the traditional business supply chain. It also, I'm not sure if I can't remember if this article talks about it or not, but also looking on various online sources that may be outside of your standard process for purchasing is also important. And then 2 other things. One of them mentioned here, if you have a bunch of old Windows equipment sitting around your district and it was Windows 7 or even Windows XP or maybe Windows Vista, if it is a relatively new machine, and I mean 10 years or less, chances are Cloud Ready from Neverware would be an excellent option here for turning that hardware into a Chromebook. Now, it's not free. You should license this from Neverware because they do that for school implementations. But my personal experimentations with Cloud Ready have been really outstanding. And in fact, I have an old desktop at home that I've converted into a Cloud Ready desktop machine, and it's the fastest machine in my house. And then just for a moment, I did end up picking up the latest HP. It's the HP 14. Which is my favorite Chromebook. These things were on sale for Best Buy, even though they were delayed in shipping. I got them for $150 off. So this was under $500 per device. This is a beautiful Chromebook. It's got an i3 chip in, 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's a convertible, so it turns into the kind of 4 means. It's a laptop, it's a tent, it's a tablet. But what
it makes you disappear with your pseudo green screen too. You literally just like became a ghost. So
yes,
wow,
I did
that, ladies and gentlemen. The extra feature that you don't necessarily hear of on the regular marketing for this particular Chromebook, probably only this model.
Right. What can I say? It's really an outstanding piece of hardware, and it's got a backlit keyboard and a fingerprint reader, and it's all metal. So
$500. What is that?
$500. Yeah, I think it was $497 or something, and then we bought a 3-year extended warranty on it because it'll we have a 3 to 4 year turnaround on it, but on equipment in my organization. But like I can't stress enough, order early, and then I'm always good for a Chromebook recommendation. So, if you are looking for a Chromebook, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on Twitter, TechSavvyTeach, and I keep up on that because the Chromebooks keep getting better and better. So a lot out of me, but I wanted to, highlight that particular article.
That's fantastic. Wow. Well, we're waiting for iPads to come. When we were ordering at the beginning of the summer, vendors that our IT folks had talked to were telling us, I think, November as a possible ship date. We were expecting to get iPads in 6 weeks, which I think would be about right now. And we just heard an update today that that's probably more like early September. So if you have not ordered for your school, I mean, it's too late. I mean, yeah, order as soon as you can, but don't plan on that. I think that's really good advice about Neverware. And I think it's going to be interesting. I don't have any articles about this, but in terms of, the kinds of support that families need and the ways in which, with home Wi-Fi, but also with computers, these are not traditional tech support roles for schools as far as extending, to the home beyond sending a device home that comes back to school. But it is going to be quite interesting to see how all of this continues to evolve and develop. And, hopefully we're going to see a lot of creative solutions and ways that we can make things work. And I think Neverware, for home use, that is completely free, Jason. Is that correct? That you can
It is, yeah. Home? No support, but to be honest, chances are you're looking at a laptop that really isn't working that well for you anyways. And I've probably installed it on 12, 15 different varieties of laptops and desktops, and it's worked every single time. It really is an amazing piece of software.
Yeah. Well, there you hear it, folks. You heard it from Jason, and There's pretty much no more credible source on the web, particularly when it comes to Chrome and Google information, than Dr. Neiffer. So, all right, well, let me do a very positive one. We're gonna have some negative stuff. Hey, let's talk Chromebooks and Microsoft Minecraft education. Noted on the show a couple weeks ago that they were out in beta, and I was kind of holding my breath, wondering how are we going to do this? Can we do it? And yes, indeed, on August 10th, Microsoft has announced that Minecraft Education Edition on the Chromebook is here. So I actually put in an IT ticket today, which is, of course, always fun at this time of year with so many things going on. But and I've got to test this. This article talks about how you need to basically allow the deployment of Android apps for Chromebook in your domain, and then enabling managed Google Play. So what I'm wondering is if this is going to only be supported on Chromebooks that can run Android, because if that's the case, then that
almost certainly.
Yeah, then that is almost certainly going to rule out functionality on a number of our older Chromebooks that we have. So maybe there will not be quite as much rejoicing. But, in general, this is a fantastic thing because we're testing actually iPad versus Chromebook this year. 6th and 7th grades at our middle school are the ones that are kind of getting to be the guinea pigs. And so 6th grade is going to have iPad for the entire fall semester through Christmas. And then in January, they're going to trade with our 7th graders who have Chromebooks. And I'm personally excited about it because it's really going to let both teachers and students provide a wealth of feedback about the two platforms, comparing them. And it's the 7th generation iPad with, this integrated docking keyboard and Logitech Apple Pencil style. And anyway, I'm pretty excited about it. But I think that the fact that you're going to need a fairly recent Chromebook that has, I think, some robust specs in order to run Android Marketplace. I don't know. Do you have any idea what percentage of the Chromebook fleet worldwide might be capable of running said Android apps, Jason?
I would say everything in the last 4 years, maybe 3 years. There was a point which they said every Chromebook forward, and then a number of them from backwards. But I mean, the one thing to remember about Android apps and Chromebooks is that even if you're using modest hardware, and I don't want to go too far down please make sure you're only buying Chromebooks with 4 or more gigabytes of RAM. But even if you have relatively modest hardware, so you're talking about the relatively basic Pentium or Celeron chips that oftentimes appear in Chromebooks sold in mass. So I'm talking about Chromebooks intended for large rollouts to students and teachers. It's still going to do a great job of running Android apps because Android apps are actually aimed at very low-end Android phones. And remember, most Android phones are actually pretty slow, right? The reason why they feel snappy is because the Android operating system, in part, scales down to relatively modest hardware. So even if you have a variety of 4 and 5 year old Chromebooks that can run the Google Play Store, there's an excellent chance that the vast majority of apps, including, I'm assuming, the Minecraft app, will work really well because, again, Android apps are aimed at low-end hardware.
That's fantastic. The other thing I'll say that I found out reading that article, and I had maybe read a hint of this, but it said very soon, so maybe it's not fully supported yet, Google logins are going to be able to be synchronized and linked to Microsoft 365, which would mean today we're not running Azure in the cloud and we have Active Directory, but we're not doing any kind of Google Sync and all that good stuff. So if we do not have to have a separate silo of passwords for our Microsoft 365 users, and especially students, they can just log in with their Google credentials. Woo, that's fantastic. So I'm pretty excited about that, and glad to share some positive news amidst our COVID time, which can sometimes be a little bit of a Debbie Downer for the emotion of the articles.
Yep, absolutely so. Right. And let me give a couple other quick Microsoft updates. And in fact, I just have one. Microsoft announced a highly anticipated phone. They announced it earlier this year, and now they have a release date and a price. It's the Surface Duo phone, which is a dual screen Android phone. And the only reason why I mention this is because I've been asked recently by a couple of friends of mine that know that I'm kind of an Android guy, whether I'm interested in this. And I have to say, generally speaking, I've been very impressed with Microsoft hardware the last couple of years. I really do feel like that they are starting to sell a premium experience with Microsoft hardware. And because they're manufacturing the hardware and the software, I think the Microsoft Windows experience is infinitely better when you're on Microsoft hardware, not unlike the Apple model or not unlike how a Chromebook works when you're running hardware from Google. But I think that this whole $1,400 dual screen phone architecture, it's not about Microsoft. Really, it's about all manufacturers of phones, is kind of silly and ridiculous. And I know that foldable screens will be a reality at some point. We've talked about them previously when Samsung released theirs. But the bottom line is that I don't like $1,400 phones. I think the whole concept is patently ridiculous. And while I think this $1,400 dual screen Android phone looks interesting and cool, the bottom line is that I just don't think it's very realistic for anyone but, tech reviewers that get one, on loan in the mail, or if you are, a super Android or I guess Microsoft person. The one thing I want to note about this, though, is a lot of interesting things have happened. Samsung's late summer release event happened. I can't remember if it was on Monday or if it was last week. It's a couple days ago.
Last week, I think.
Yeah, and they announced the latest Note phone, which is the Samsung S20 Note, or Note S20, or Note 20, and beautiful looking phone, but the high-end version of that phone is also $1,400. But the reason why this is super interesting is because Samsung has integrated a number of Microsoft features into the phone, so that, as an example, you can take a note using the S Pen from Samsung, which is integrated into the Note platform, and it syncs automatically to OneNote. And there's been a lot of interesting pieces back and forth where the Android ecosystem, the Microsoft ecosystem talk to one another. I would say if you're an Office 365 district and you're not otherwise super into the Google architecture personally, consider downloading all of the Microsoft apps to your phone. There's a launcher that you can get for your Android phone that's made by Microsoft that integrates all of the Office 365 stuff into it. And, Microsoft, despite utterly losing the mobile phone race, has created a competitive product on top of Android. I wouldn't have guessed that 5 years ago, but that's definitely true. So I wanted to mention that as it released.
Another example of Microsoft's really big pivot in deciding to try to be relevant on every single platform and not trying to, just force everybody to buy certain hardware. Jason, my parents are among those live viewing tonight. We've had 3 and 4 folks live. Hello, Mom and Dad. My dad had actually said specifically to give you a shout out to say hello. But my mother has asked a question on Facebook. Jason, your ears are vibrating or trying to escape. I think your virtual background may be a bit confused by your headphones tonight. So, yeah. Such are the the breaks when we are without a true green screen but still using software emulation. So there is the true. Are you in the basement tonight, or is this?
No, I call this a Sky Office, and in
Okay.
fact, I even have it a little blurred in the background. I will make it totally clear. I got a Montana flag hanging up back here now, and then this is my stack of Chromebooks I've got to process for new employees, and then I bought a level. So this is what I'm currently working on in the Neiffer office.
Awesome. Okay, let's do kind of a consumer one a little bit. I think you've done Google Music before. I was surprised to read this. So this is Ars Technica yesterday on August 11th. Headline is, Google says it's working hard to address YouTube music complaints. And as I've mentioned on the show, we have become mostly a Spotify family. My wife is not as much into music, and I think my son is heavily invested into his Apple playlist, but both of our daughters and myself are loving Spotify. This article has a link at the beginning. It says, Google Play Music is shutting down soon, and the transition to YouTube Music currently leaves a lot to be desired. And so if you've got uploaded music, you have a lot of features that are gone, and There's free tier music that's not available, etc. So this is not necessary. Well, I mean, it's interesting for school. I'll say this: so in addition to having a whole new network at school, we have a new firewall, which I think is going to be great. There's a lot more bandwidth capability, but our filtering is going to be different. And of course, it's wonderful to be able to stream music. Last year, we actually did have a rule in our middle school that I helped encourage, which was for students not to just all open up, YouTube music whenever they wanted to on their device. I mean, that could have an impact as far as network connectivity and things like that. So your policies in your school about streaming music and things like that over Wi-Fi, can be important. Are you suffering as a Google Music aficionado, Jason, or how is that affecting you in the Neiffer household, which I'm sure has a Google Home in every room, probably simultaneously able to stream, as a single speaker, as one?
So I have to say I'm a primary Spotify user, in part because I have a family account and share it amongst my family, right? So I originally picked up Google Play Music because I liked the interface, and then they started adding on all sorts of extras to it, which is why I keep it. And I think I'm paying still only $5.99 a month for it. I'm not paying the premium price, and I keep Google Play Music, which is now going to become YouTube Music, not because of Google Play Music. I keep it because it gives me YouTube Premium. And one of the things I keep forgetting about, and I've talked about probably a dozen times on this podcast, how much I keep falling in love with YouTube over and over and over again, because there's so many wonderful channels on YouTube that I'm infinitely entertained by and enlightened by, that I had a hard time giving that up. But then I realized when I look at other YouTube users, that one of the reasons why I have such a great experience is because I never see an ad, because for whatever it is I'm paying a month, in addition to YouTube Music, I'm also getting YouTube Premium, which means I never see an advertisement ever on my YouTube account. And that makes an incredible difference in my experience on YouTube. Now, the reason why I mentioned that is because I was an original Google Play Music user, and the shtick used to be that you could upload all of your music library, which I did at the time. The maximum was 50,000 songs, and I believe I uploaded 14,000 songs at the time. Huge old Apple, iTunes library to it. And as it turns out, I ended up deleting a lot of that because I had poorly tagged music. In some cases, I had weird versions of songs, and the master library would be better. But I did get the notification about 3 weeks ago to move it over to YouTube Music, and I did. And so far, I like it. But in reading that article, I probably don't rely on it enough to run into some of these problems, but I do think it is a big deal that people are running into these problems. I think it's kind of a brilliant play on Google's part to make it one branded YouTube Music app, in part because one of the things that's true, especially of 20 and early 30-year-olds, is a lot of people use YouTube as a knockoff cheap Spotify, right? They stream songs via video, then utilizing a Spotify. So I've not run into these problems. I do like the general setup of the app, but then I'm a little spoiled because I have access to both.
Absolutely. All right. Well, folks, normally we're tying things into school, but sometimes you got to delve into the home aspect. And I still continue to be amazed and loving having a few Google Home Minis around and just being able to use voice commands and listen to playlists and all of that. So if you are a music lover and you are not, if you haven't at least, this is going to sound like an ad. We have no ads, folks. We are compensated financially in no way for bringing you our wonderful show. We've talked about that, but we're busy with other things. But anyway, I'll just throw in a free ad for Spotify. If you haven't tried that, it's interesting the play that Spotify is making with podcasts. There's some different podcasts that will have exclusive content or it'll be released first for Spotify. But anyway, pairing a smart speaker today with a service like Spotify and being able, I'm not as much into the discovery. It is sometimes, making these suggestions and things like that to recommend music that I might not have otherwise found. But
yep.
It is superb. We digress a
Right.
bit from our normal educational technology focus. So can you bring us back to the schoolhouse, Dr. Neiffer? What else should we talk about
Sure.
tonight?
Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about well, there's some tech correction articles that have held over a couple of weeks that I think it'd be a good time to talk about these tonight. So one in particular, first and foremost, a tech correction for those new to the podcast is our concept that there is something going on. It started around 2015 where the explosive growth of technology started getting reconsidered in a lot of different realms and theaters, but I think in education certainly, but broadly in our culture. So when Facebook started getting questioned for things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened in 2016, the distrust that started growing of social media, for example, I think is an example of tech correction. But great article, and I'm sorry that I'm going to butcher this poor woman's name. I think it's Anya Kamenetz.
Kamenetz, I think.
Thank you. And she is the author of a great book about screen time, but she wrote an article, this was in July in the New York Times. It's titled, "I was a screen time expert, then the coronavirus happened." And she talks a little bit about kind of reconsidering her view on this. And I love that book. I bought that book. I actually integrated some of those ideas in trainings that I've been giving. I too am a not anti-screen time. I just think that we have to be more thoughtful about the way we apply technology, extremely powerful technology in our world. But she talks about how being at home with her kids as part of a pandemic has caused her to reconsider some of her views on screen time. It's not that she doesn't question screen time, but she's put in a new variable into this that we've actually talked about. And in fact, it feels kind of like she stole this directly from Dr. Fryer. The notion that there is high quality screen time and there is low quality screen time, and that the quality of the screen time and what you're doing with the screen time matters just as much as the actual number of minutes you spend on this. And this has always been my argument too, that it's never as easy as yes or no. It's always a much more nuanced answer than that. But this article talks about this, and quite frankly, I think that one of the conversations we're going to have post-pandemic is how technology saved us in a lot of different ways. It was a distraction. It allowed us to stay connected to folks. I've mentioned in past weeks that, I have some real problems with Facebook as a concept, but I got to tell you, Facebook has really been my connection with, literally hundreds of people that I wasn't seeing in person otherwise, but I feel a real human connection to. I'd be awfully lonely right now if it was just me alone. And I'm sure my wife, who is actually off of Facebook now, she is logged off of Facebook and only gets on once a month, but she also much more actively texts friends than I do. So, there's a way that the technologies provide a connection to us. So, Wes, again, I kind of consider you to be amongst the earlier voices that talked about the quality of screen time. But do you have any thoughts about maybe looking at screen time differently in light of COVID?
Oh, I certainly think that we need to think about the upside, the bright side in terms of all the things we're having to do and the changes, the utilization of different technologies by teachers who might not have been encouraged, pushed, cajoled, to be able to be using them. There's a lot of positives in that. We talk about how things aren't going to be the same. They're not the same, right now and following this pandemic. I think that, the ability for us to get better windows into learning and for us to be able to make connections. People will lament, I don't know what the different words are, but just so much time on Zoom, so much time on the screen. These are all healthy things that we've been talking about in the arena of wellness and self-care and digital citizenship. It's just more mainstream now than ever. And so Moose has brought his moose to the show. So hello there, buddy. So anyway, her book, by the way, is called The Art of Screen Time: How Your Family Can Balance Digital Media in Real Life. It's one of the best books that I have seen, and she's one of the foremost authors, I think, and outspoken media voices who is advocating balance and not just saying, throw it all away and it's all terrible. It really is a mix. Because these are powerful tools, right? Incredibly powerful tools. How crazy is it that Jason and I get to basically just, sit down a few minutes before the top of the hour each Wednesday night, 9 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock his time, and, have this conversation. And my parents are in their house in Kansas watching us live, and some other folks are too. And by the way, say hi in the chat if you're out there to let us know. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? These are also incredibly humanizing. They can be incredibly humanizing technologies. And so, I think that's a great article. And I think we need to continue to have these conversations, not only with other teachers and colleagues, but also with parents, because it's really not a changed message from what a lot of us have been saying for a long time, and that is, let's be intentional with our use of these screens. Let's look at how these are impacting our relationships and our lives. Let's not just turn our kids loose with whatever device it is and never ask them about it, pay attention to what they're doing. I mean, we need to be in dialogue and conversation, and because these are issues that affect us all. It is not simply, those kids today that are just so terrible. I mean, it affects everybody. I admit I was actually putting some articles tonight for our show on at dinner, and my wife's like, "Why do you have your computer out?" I was like, "No, you're right." We all need to be, talking about these things, and hopefully, we're going to be able to really extend the positive that is going to come from this. As we've talked about, quite a bit on the show, and don't necessarily have articles tonight. Digital divide, gaps in educational, in home internet access, all of those things definitely play into this. So, hey, Eric Langhorst is checking in from his basement in Liberty, Missouri, building his virtual learning environment. That's right, because Eric's school district asked teachers to apply to teach on their virtual team and be all online, and he applied and was accepted. So that is pretty cool. But that, I would say, that is something, a larger district is going to be able to do. We are not having that luxury in our smaller school. And of course, it'll be interesting to see, if at some point we are forced all to go home, and exactly how that plays out. So, Dr. Neiffer, what would your number one home office virtual learning tip for Eric Langhorst and others like him be? Because I know you have really transformed your space. And are you close to nirvana, unicorns and rainbows all over, the Neiffer workspace right now?
Well, speaking just from the standpoint of my personal workspace at home, I am getting pretty close. And I think I mentioned in the past that when this whole thing started going down in March and April, and it became increasingly clear that I would not be able to leave my house for a long time, my wife said, we're not traveling anymore. Our travel budget is not going to get touched for a while. Get the office of your dreams. I'm not there yet. I'm close. One of the things I am missing is things hanging up on the wall. Like, I have a variety of great things that I hope to put up in the coming weeks. But I would say, at least from purely the standpoint of working at home, don't forget about ergonomics. And it's absolutely critical that you look up good ergonomic practice, but have a good chair. It's worth the investment. Make sure the chair, and in fact, I'm going to sit up a little bit here because I have worked on ergonomics at home. That you have the ability to look at a monitor closely. I have a webcam that's right above me here, but I have two monitors, one here and one here. But it's set up. It's about 66% above, 2/3 above. It's where my eye line is, so that I don't have to spend a lot of time kind of crinching is a word I made up, my neck. But I'm trying to, I'm very careful about that. But if you're going to spend a lot of time at home, absolutely 100%, you need to make sure that, that's, you're taking care of yourself in that way. And then one other side note, if you're going from an active teaching position, in other words, Eric, what you were doing in a face-to-face classroom last year, I have no doubt that you spend a lot of time walking around your classroom, going from desk to desk, group to group. I have no doubt you are an extremely active teacher. My guess is you got a serious number of steps every day. When you start at a desk job, which teaching online largely is, your activity would go down dramatically. If you don't already have some kind, and I have a Fitbit, which is what noted this to me 10 years ago, keep track of your steps. And if you're not getting enough exercise, get up out of your seat, multiple times a day, take 100, 200 steps, even if it's just a swing around the room, because the desk doom is real.
Absolutely. You want to pick up any more tech correction articles?
Yeah, just one other I would point out that is kind of related to this. This is from The Verge on July 28th. What happens when you reach your limit online? And it is full of strategies about what happens when you're maybe engaging in tech in a negative way. And it introduces a term that I know has been around for a couple months now, doom scrolling, which is actually a term that appeared in the New York Times for the first time a couple weeks ago. Doom scrolling is the notion that you have opened up the news and it's bad news. And there tends to be a lot of bad news in the news lately, and you can't stop. And even though you know what the headlines look like, you keep looking at it. And because you have access to literally tens of thousands of news sources, you could steep yourself in really bad news forever and ever and ever. And it goes through some strategies, one of which is limit yourself in news scrolling every day. Even if you're a news junkie, they suggest setting a 10-minute timer as a strategy here. But under the same notion of being a nuanced user, right? A smart implicator, a smart user of tech, that you give yourself the opportunity to not get deep into some kind of internet hole, even when you're just checking the news. So I thought it was a pretty solid article, and The Verge gives good strategies, including that 10-minute timer for news, so that you don't get stuck on your phone in the bad news.
That's excellent. So Eric had said he's got the new chair from IKEA ordered, and he has also set up the second screen with an old monitor. And I would say absolutely. I was able to participate in 3 virtual conference events this summer. And in the third one, which was using Zoom lots, I actually used my iPad in what's called sidecar mode. And you have to have newer hardware to do this. Wow, was that ever great to be able to have content on one and then, chat and video on the other. Costco, and this, I don't know if the price is still there, but they had a 27-inch HDMI monitor, for like $120. And that was a few weeks ago, but that is definitely an investment that's worth making. I would also give a shout out to what you're saying, Jason, to a workshop that I shared a few months back. This was in April 2019. I called it Filtering the Exoflood. But yes, the skills of filtering information and trying to be very judicious and intentional about sources and who we're following, and not just sort of opening ourselves up to this fire hydrant and torrent of frankly a lot of pollution. I like that metaphor, a lot of a polluted landscape. So those are important skills, and those are also things for us to be sharing resources with each other, sharing them with family members, with colleagues, because these are media and digital literacy skills that we all need. So let's do an information warfare article. So we'll call some of these I don't know. I worked on the project Conspiracies and Culture Wars quite a bit this summer, and I need to do a little bit more with that. But we got to get some Spanish lessons written, so maybe not for a few weeks. But this is an article from Vice that was titled "Belarus is trying to block parts of the internet amid historic protests." This was from August 10th. Twitter, local journalists, and internet freedom organizations report there are widespread internet blocks in Belarus. So the longtime president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. Yes, there you go. Won with 80% of the vote. But the government responded by arresting protesters, blocking Twitter. On this past Monday, Twitter was announcing it was seeing blocking and throttling of Twitter in Belarus in response to protests contesting the election result. So, yes, this is an example of the information war, which several authors have termed the like war, and that's an excellent book I'm not finished with yet. And that is how some folks are responding. So, Jason, do you have any political prognostications that you would like to offer at this point, as you have an amazing crystal ball there in Montana, I think, that can forecast with great accuracy not only local election results but also national ones?
Well, I've been to Belarus, and in fact, in 2004, I took a group of debate students from Great Falls, Montana, and we did a debate exchange with Gomel, Belarus. There was a lyceum or a high school in Gomel that visited us fall 2003, and then I hopped on an airplane for 4 weeks in spring 2004, and an utterly amazing trip. We'll never forget it. But Belarus was under the leadership of Mr. Lukashenko in 2004. In fact, he's been the ruler or self-described dictator. When I use that term, it's a term he would use himself to describe his position. But the reason why this is super interesting to me is because I've kept an eye on Mr. Lukashenko, and I have friends that live in Belarus. But the internet is an interesting thing there. At that time in 2004, it was dial-up internet, which wasn't a real surprise. And I felt there's no real cell phone culture there yet. People had cell phones, but we're talking about flip phones during this time, no real data. And I did have the opportunity to email my wife. There was a cyber cafe down the street, and then there was dial-up available that I could utilize. But the reason why it's been so interesting to me is because I do think the internet can be a very democratizing force, because people connecting together can be extremely powerful. And I have been very carefully watching that situation. And the candidate who has literally fled the country, I believe that she is in Lithuania now, and by all international accounts, in fact, NPR just went ahead and said last week when reporting on the pre-election information, they said, well, even though the candidate, and I'm sorry that I did not know her name off the top, I was like Lukanskaya, I think was her last name, Svetlana Lukanskaya. She was sparking some interest in the country of Belarus, but NPR just straight up said, but the election won't be fair, so there's no chance that she would win. And the fact that she received 20% of the vote itself, I think, is a pretty extraordinary situation. But when we were there, we actually had to have a State Department briefing before we went to Belarus, and we were very strictly warned that we were not to get involved in political protests. We're not to engage in political speech while we are there. And in fact, the school I talked to, one of the history teachers that I spent a lot of time speaking to, they had an underground newspaper that they actually sent outside the country to get printed. It was a underground school newspaper, but it was sent outside, and it was kind of an interesting view on a country that clearly had an extreme limit on civil rights. Two other quick stories from that. By the way, we had a phone number to call if things were rough while we were there, and that I think the State Department would have sent in people to come get us. And I don't know if black helicopters show up from Munich or something, but certainly there was a notion that we should let them know if things were going awry. And then secondarily, one of my debaters that was with me, we took a train to Minsk to go to the national high school debate tournament that was happening during that time, and she was aggressively questioned by a guard in the train station that had a semi-automatic weapon because she had fell asleep in a chair, and sleeping strictly prohibited in the train station. And it was an interesting introduction to my students then about living under a slightly different world view. So very interesting. I do have internet connections with friends. I have not been able to reach them as of late. I'm sure they're okay, but I've been watching it with great interest.
Absolutely. So a couple additions to that. Here's a link from a website called Netblocks, and this is from August 9th, entitled Internet Disruption Hits Belarus on Election Day. And so this Netblocks maps net freedom, and so disruptions on Election Day in Burundi, in Guinea, in Venezuela. This is amazing, and this would be actually a great website in terms of contemporary events and studying geopolitics and the ways in which, digital technologies and internet access are playing into all of this. This article from Netblocks on August 9th has been updated. They have a tweet from August 9th that said, Belarus is in the midst of nation-scale internet disruption affecting fixed line and cellular operators. The chart shows progressive disconnection of various online platforms, public DNS services, first to go from midnight, then social media. And then it has an update from today at 7:19 a.m. I'm thinking that's converting to my local time here in Central. Update, internet has returned to most of Belarus as of Wednesday morning, election blackout day 4, with cellular and fixed line now operational, although monitoring continues. Incident duration 61 hours. So this makes me think of Ukraine and other places. This is one of these like, hello, yes, you're very sweet. This is one of my dog. For those of you who are listening to this, you will not be able to see that my dog has just decided to give me a kiss. Sorry for that disruption. Speaking of disruptions, I don't think most people recognize how hostile the networked environment has become. The ways in which, we're becoming more aware of it politically. The tech correction, as Jason mentioned, is a part of it, but it is we take things for granted in terms of freedom and access that we have. And so this is a playbook for authoritarian leaders that want to maintain control. Arab Spring, which I think happened maybe in 2011, maybe something like that, 2010. That really frightened all kinds of authoritarian leaders around the world. And since then, that's been about 10 years. We've seen a lot of, I think, very repressive uses of technology. And as we think about geopolitics and we think about, just this connected planet, the way, we always say we're not a political show, and we're not going to be, but I will say this: we need to be stewards of our planet, right? You can have all kinds of different bases for this, but we need to leave this place better than we found it. And we need to find ways that we're going to be able to promote, values like human rights and self-determination. And so those values, particularly those of self-determination, open and free elections, are being subverted with the weaponization of social media. And what we've just seen in Belarus appears to be a textbook study of how groups that are going to protest and advocate for fair elections are going to, that forces in this case in government are going to try to silence them and stop them from using social media and even using the internet. And so it is a pretty frightening thing. And it's probably an example too of a headline that maybe we didn't notice in the United States because there's all kinds of other hoopla, which is justified around coronavirus and election. But there are more things going on in the world that are important besides, elections in the United States and the coronavirus. And I would say this kind of a political situation in Belarus and elsewhere, deserves a lot of attention. So will you be returning to Belarus promptly when the coronavirus travel restrictions are lowered, Jason?
I will not, although Alexander Lukashenko did say that all you need to do is take a strong shot of vodka every day, and that will battle any coronavirus. I haven't gotten coronavirus yet, so I won't say whether or not I've taken that advice, but, it works for me.
Very good. All right. Well, we've got a few more minutes before maybe we have to Geek of the Week it. What else would you like to cover news-wise this week?
Sure. A couple quick Apple articles that I think were interesting. First and foremost, there's been a new iMac released. We talked about this in a past episode. It's the 2020 iMac, and it contains 10th generation Intel chips. A lot of interesting media that if you are up for a Mac, don't wait around for the Apple Silicon Macs. You can buy this iMac, and it's a great purchase. But as always, if you've had any experience buying Apple products, one of the things that you almost always get a ridiculous upcharge on is when you buy extra RAM in your Mac. And it's been harder as of late if you're purchasing a MacBook Pro, for example, and certainly a MacBook Air. Oftentimes, the RAM is soldered into the motherboard, so you can't upgrade it. But as it turns out, there's an easy upgrade path. You just have to open a panel and you can update your own RAM. And there's a great article from 9 to 5 Mac that walks you through the process that if you're buying one of the high-end iMacs, instead of buying or instead of buying the RAM from Apple, you can get up to 128 gigs of RAM, which it just blows my mind that that's even available. But if you buy it from a third party as opposed to buying it from Apple, you'll pay $600 as opposed to $2,600. And when you talk about the iMac being a $2,000, $2,500 product, suddenly it's not actually that ridiculous to think about spending $600 on a 128 gigabyte RAM upgrade. But as an example of this, if you want 32 gigs of RAM, it's just $130 to buy that from third-party dealers. And they talk about Other World Computing, which is a somewhat long-standing Apple upgrade product. But if you are in the iMac market, do not buy Apple's RAM upgrades. Instead, go aftermarket hardware, and you'll save a bundle.
Sounds good. Peggy George has joined us. Hello, Peggy. And she was in a fantastic webinar shared by a lawyer's night called "The Protesting Primer: Your Free Speech and Arrest Rights in a Time of Civil Unrest." And I will say, I've noticed this, all of our show notes and the links that are shared by our live viewers, those are not only on YouTube in the replay of the video for the show, but they're also on Facebook. So that is fantastic. Peggy has shared the slides, and anyway, that's something else cool. And there's the recording. So it looks like it was on Facebook Live. Let's see. I'll pick up one more article here. Let's talk about broadband. This is an Ars Technica article from yesterday, August 11th. Charter tries to convince FCC that broadband customers want data caps. And the reason why I am mentioning this is because we have faced our first data cap charge here in the Fryer home in Oklahoma City. The article explains how the Federal Communications Commission allows for different filings, and they basically want their Spectrum internet service providers to be able to have data caps. It's super interesting because here in the United States, and this is a different norm in other countries, which Jason's probably pretty familiar with having traveled to these different places, we've had data caps on cellular connections, but not historically on home broadband connections. So this last month, our local provider, which is Cox Communications, increased our cap from a terabyte, which is a heck of a lot of data, to a terabyte and a quarter. But if we blew through that, the charge was $10 per 50 gigs, I think. And so anyway, that could get kind of steep. So I went ahead and threw down another $30 a month for another 500 gigs. And we are within our cap now. That was summer. Son is here working remotely. If we don't go back to remote learning, we very well could, except for maybe holiday time in December or whatever, survive fine within those data caps. But are you subject to data caps? And are you with Charter on this, Jason? Do consumers in Montana, do you want data caps as soon as possible?
So I think Charter and Spectrum are the same company, right?
Yep.
So I am a Charter customer, and I will tell you right now, I do not want a data cap. And I feel like I have strong opinions about technology in the world, and yet I can tell you with absolute certainty that I do not want a data cap. And I was just going to look via my Google Wi-Fi router, because I can tell you how much I've used in the last 30 days. We're in a bit of a different situation because it's just me and my wife, and we are both working at home, and we spend an awful lot of time on Zoom calls. But I was going to check to see what that looked like for us. But it's funny because if you read that article, it gets into the details about a lot of the counter arguments against a data cap will be things like that there is no competition for Charter in many of the places where they're located. And that would be the case in Missoula. We have DSL, although DSL is much slower than cable internet access, but we don't have any fiber providers here. We don't have any kind of broadband wireless providers other than major cell phone companies, which would be kind of a different gig. And I cannot say that myself that I have desired that, but I think if you're using a terabyte, especially if it's a couple, and I'm terrified that that's going to be what's going to tell me is you used a terabyte this month. I can't imagine a consumer that's asking for that, or even knows to ask for that, right? And so I think they're making that up just a bit. But in the last 30 days, I have used 858 gigs,
approaching the terabyte.
Yep. So we would be, I think, suspect of that. I will tell you though, as an example of using up a lot of data, every time I reset my phone, which I do every 2 to 3 months, I have a program that downloads. I store a bunch of movies and music and television shows on my phone for when I travel. That's obviously not going to be needed in the near future, but I oftentimes will download 40 or 50 gigs of stuff from one of my cloud accounts to my phone to travel with. And so I guess under that notion, I would just have to not download that, or I'd have to do it on a public, or I'd have to go do it at work, or I think it's a strange argument.
And if you've got a console, and we do have one, but we're not avid gamers. New games can be incredible. My friend James Deaton, who now works with an Internet 2 consortium, shared a little bit about the impact that can have when one of these new games. Pardon me, when one of these new games hits and, people have to download, multiple gigabytes, and it's pulled down to everybody's house. Well, I don't know how it happened, Jason, but I think we might have crossed the top of the hour. It's shocking.
Okay. Well, let me do my Geek of the Week, and I can toss it back to you. As I've talked about in the past, and I talked about earlier in this episode, Cloud Ready from Neverware is a Chromebook-like experience. It uses Chromium, the open source, and I found a tutorial a couple weeks ago that allowed me to basically refurbish my very beloved 2013 Chrome Pixelbook. I bought this a few years after it was released for dirt cheap on eBay. This was the first released premium Chromebook from Google. It stopped receiving updates in 2018 and had been sitting at the bottom of a drawer at work. And I ran into an article a few weeks ago about how you can replace the firmware, so the software that interfaces with the hardware, and then wipe it and put Cloud Ready onto here. And sure enough, my beloved Chromebook, which you can, I guess, see us in reflection, is probably not going to turn on now. But yeah, there it is. This is Cloud Ready. And so it's receiving new updates again. I can't say I'm totally in love with it's only got 4 gigs of RAM. It's a 7-year-old chip. It's only got 32 gigs of storage. But the first generation Chromebook Pixel has the best keyboard I have ever used on any device. And so I've been totally in love again. And all I had to do was pop the back off and pull a jumper and then run a couple of commands on the command line. And it was super simple. So I put the directions. If you happen to be like a district that has some of these bad boys sitting around, or if you're a developer, you're probably not watching our show, but if you're a developer, then you might have received one of these in the 2013 Google I/O. You can actually start getting updates on this again with Cloud Ready.
That is awesome. I will quickly overshare, as I am prone to do now, with Geek of the Week. First, Peggy George, thank you, sharing that Long Beach Public Media had shared that webinar. You can visit them on facebook.com/LB Public Media. And last week they had a show from the News Literacy Project, which is absolutely fantastic. If you don't follow News Literacy Project on Twitter and the newsletters that they send out, their session last week was called What It Means to Be News Literate, which is fantastic. First Geek of the Week for me is a new screencasting tool, Loom. I had heard a bit about Loom at the Mountain Moot. I actually tried it today to do my first screencast. Very awesome. Got a free pro account as a teacher, which also is awesome. I do love Screencastify, but it limits free accounts to 5 minutes. I'd pay $25 for that upgrade, but really like Loom and would recommend that. Second one, this is hilarious. Well, no, this one isn't hilarious. This is just great. This is Professor Fleming, who is at Stony Brook University, and she created a wonderful iMovie trailer for her course, Qualitative Interviewing Research Methods for the Digital Age. So if you've seen, iMovie trailers, I've seen a lot that kids have created and things like that. It's kind of cool to see one for a college, research course that, shows how, all kinds of different ways to engage. Been doing a lot of workshops and training this week, getting back to school. One of the great resources that everybody should certainly know about is Shake Up Learning, and this is a Google cheat sheet, which is just fantastic. Even if you know a lot about Google, there's always more to learn. And so Casey Bell has the Shake Up Learning website and Twitter handle. And so that is just one of many awesome cheat sheets that she has for Google tools. And finally, my last thing, this one is the funny one. Harris County Libraries, which I think it's got to be in Texas for this. This came with a Twitter share. This is a triumph. If you've ever seen, and who hasn't, a used car salesman who is so excited to tell you about the latest deals, this is all about the library and all the wonderful resources that you can find in the library, and a very creative and humorous and I would say effective public service announcement by someone who very well could be a used car salesman, but I think he just happens to be a librarian. So that is it for me. I am W. Fryer on Twitter. I'll just anticipate this last question. Sharing at speedofcreativity.org every once in a while and updating my not only media and digital literacy curriculum, but also my Spanish curriculum, which will be starting that on Friday at mdtech.cassidy.org. Where are you out in the URL world, Dr. Neiffer?
I am at Tech Savvy Teach on Twitter. I also blog for the Northwest Council for Computer Education, blog.ncc.org. And I am the assistant director of the Montana Digital Academy, montanadigitalacademy.org. But this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast that broadcasts on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central Time, sometime in the middle of the night if you happen to be in Western Europe. But hey, you should probably catch us on our podcast feed. You can go to any podcast app and look for EdTech Situation Room. You can go to our website, edtechsr.com. You can look for us on YouTube, where you can find past episodes or the most recent episode for your listening and viewing pleasure. We hope you tune in next time live, as we do each and every week. You can get links for that on Facebook or at our Twitter handle, edtechsr.com. And we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Have a great week, everybody.